Another episode that was really worthwhile was there was one guy, I forget his name. He was in his car and he got shot in the face, but he lived. So, of course, if he didn't, you wouldn't have had the interview. But,
Right.
but just going through all that, and still, I think he was a jujitsu practitioner. I forget what belt he was or something like that. I
Yeah,
don't
if I
know if
recall
you're.
correctly.
Yeah, so he still had the wherewithal to actually fight back and survive that encounter, and that's huge, man. Wow.
Yeah, the reason our motto, our name is Active Self Protection, right? ASP. And our motto is attitude, skills, and plan. Notice we don't mention equipment in there because equipment really is secondary to everything else. You want to have good equipment, of course. For me, the most important thing is attitude.
Wilderness Tactical has been around for longer than the gun you're carrying has been, and they have been making high quality products for concealed carriers for literally decades. I wear their low pro belt every year. The webbing is the best in the industry, and I won't wear anything else. If you're looking for a good CCW belt, check them out.
You give me somebody with zero training and an attitude that I'm going to survive an encounter, I will give that person better odds than someone who has all the equipment in the world and all the training in the world, but is scared and defeatist. And it's like, I can't, I was telling John earlier during one of these badge cams, I've seen badge cams, not that we've done on the channel, where you see the moment the officer or the deputy gave up. And they're like, well, I guess I'm screwed. I'm going to lay down and die now. And that should never be anyone. No one should ever do that. So the attitude part of ASP is, in the case you cited, like I made it through that. A lot of people would have been like, well, I'm shot in the face. I guess this is it. And I just get the sense that if you have the right attitude, you can make it through almost anything. But the moment you give up is, well, it's the moment you give up, isn't it? And I don't want any of my listeners to ever give up in a defensive encounter. I want them to understand that attitude is, for me, and I'm not speaking for John or Steph or Neil or anyone else, but for me, attitude is number one. And then you take that attitude and you get yourself the skills and the equipment and the plan and the mental reps that we try to provide on the main channel, on the extra channel, on the podcast, and all of our training. Mental reps are a real thing and they're critical. As I tell cops, you're walking up to an unknown house for whatever kind of call, doesn't matter. Could be DV, could be a burglary report. They got broken into, the bad guy's gone, and you're going to take a report now. Treat every call the same. As John likes to say, treat every call like it's a training evolution. Like you're in training and I got to do everything just right. And you'll never go wrong. So when you're approaching a house for a DV, obviously I want you on the approach to be looking around for cover in case someone starts shooting at you out of the upstairs window. I want you looking for whatever there is, a big USPS mailbox, a fire hydrant, a curb, if that's all there is. But identify that so you're not looking for it once you're being shot at from the upstairs window, which happens all the time in DV calls. But also, when you're approaching the house on that burglary report or that missing cat or whatever inane call that isn't really that exciting, treat that call just like you treat any other. Be looking for the cover, do all those things and go through all those motions and get that mental. Okay, if somebody comes out of the door with a knife, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? If someone comes out of the door with a gun, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? How am I going to respond? Am I going to have time from where I'm standing right now to get to that cover? Or is it better for me to stand and fight where I am? There's a million things that go into that calculation, but the mental reps, I think, are undervalued in the industry in general by self-defense and people. And on the non-sworn side and the law enforcement side, I don't think attitude is stressed enough. It used to be. Back in the 80s, there was a book called Street Survival that was aimed at law enforcement. And it talked a lot about your attitude being critically important. Of course, we want you to get the training, quality training. Of course, we want you to have the best equipment you could possibly have and the best, everything else, the best equipment, the best car. But if you don't have the attitude in place, if you haven't thought it through and had that conversation with yourself and your God, you could have a problem. And I think most people already know. They already know if they're capable of it or not. They don't have to think about it all that hard. You see cops. There was one in Baltimore not that long ago. Gal was about to be stabbed. She was on her back on a curb, downtown Baltimore. Gotta love Baltimore. And there's a guy on top of her like this, knife in hand, about to plunge it into her. They pull up. Cops get out, both sides. The driver officer, whose badge camera were watching primarily, runs up, burns that guy to the ground. Just absolutely smokes him. which is the only thing he could do. There's nothing else to be done. There was no disarming him. The female half was about to get stabbed by him, and he shot him a bunch of times. And then he turns back towards his police car. And what do you see? Standing behind the police car on the other side is his partner, hanging out, talking on the radio, looking over the hood of the car. I promise you, that guy already knew this wasn't for him. And I want to stress this as well. If you want to go into law enforcement, you already know if you have what it takes to step into something. I think people inherently understand I'm a defender, I'm a protector, or I'm not. What I want to do is destigmatize not being that protector. If that's not you, that's okay. Like, some people just don't have that in them at all. And no amount of training and preparation and mental prep and mental reps can change that about their person. I think a lot of people are that way, and that's okay. Do not put yourself in a position where other people are relying on you to step into the breach and handle business if you already know you can't. And I think that officer knew that already. This wasn't even a guy with a gun. It wasn't even like he was in all that much danger from this call. He just saw, oh, bad thing, really bad thing happening right over there. I'm gonna try to look official and stand here by my car with my gun out, talking on the radio, doing whatever. I called that guy out pretty harshly on that video, but the public needed to hear me say that, and he needed to hear me say that. And I'll say there's other ways to help people out. There's paramedic, there's firefighter, there's librarian, school teacher. There's a ton of ways to serve your community that don't involve you having a badge and a gun. If your badge and gun are a fashion accessory for you, if they are your identity as like, I'm a tough guy because I have fill in the blank, that's a problem. But I'll say it one last time, I think those officers, those deputies, those agents know that in their heart, and they're just hoping they never get tested. They're just hoping the day never comes when they have to respond to something like that. And that's one of the things I'm preaching is, look, if that's you, that's okay. You don't have to be ashamed of it. You don't have to feel bad about it, but you need to change jobs. You shouldn't be in security. You should not be in the military. No, you can't just not be in the military. If you join the military, you got a problem, right? But if you're LE, go to your sergeant, go to your lieutenant and be like, man, can we find something else for me to do? I know you put all this money and time and energy into training me or whatever. I don't feel like I can do this job. And any supervisor worth their salt should respond to that with, thank you so much for telling us that. I really appreciate it. There's other stuff you could do in the police department, right? That doesn't involve you being on the front line. There's all sorts of CSI. There's 1,000 jobs in any given police department that you can go do, that if you don't have the attitude to finish a job, nobody's risked their lives by you having that position. So that's another thing that I talk about maybe too much on the badge cams.
I feel that, that's going to be hard for people to do because,
Sure.
Law enforcement, just like the military, you can have a very much of a warrior culture, and, there's going to be a stigma attached to that. You know what I mean? And people may be all too aware of what that stigma is. And, I wonder if that's something that, makes it worth it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's one of the reasons that I'm saying this all the time, is so that maybe that stigma is a little bit less. But I guess you have to ask yourself this question: do I want to be the person who's looked at as a wimp because I turned in my badge and gun, or do I want to be the person who's looked at as an absolute coward because he didn't go into the school, he pulled a Uvalde, or he pulled a Parkland and didn't do the thing he was there, or she was there to do? I would much rather take the shame of a few cops thinking I'm a fill in the blank with whatever word you want to use, a wuss. I can live with that. What I can't live with is, a bunch of dead kids in a classroom because I was scared or I didn't want to take charge in that moment and I didn't act. Another thing that I say all the time is, if you're LE and you're on the scene of something, like Uvalde is a really good example of this, actually. If you're first on the scene and you got a couple other cops with you and nobody appears to be in charge, guess what? You're in charge. So you formulate a plan and you lead these men and women into battle to do whatever you got to do. At school shooting, there's no time for grouping up and staging and all this other nonsense.
Just find them.
The lead instructor when I went to active shooter school at Fort Benning, he said, "Look, we're going to give you he had a super duper Bama accent. He said, we're going to go through all sorts of training here over the next few days, but I want y'all to understand one thing. There are 2 rules when you're facing an active shooter. Find him and kill him. And he, that's actually, sadly, it's most of the battle. Tactics are what they are. That's important. But in the event of a school shooter, I want to see Nashville, not Uvalde. I want to see officers
Yeah.
who get in. Don't wait around for backup. Don't wait around for anything. Because I don't know about you. I'm sure you feel the same way, but I can't imagine how I would live with myself if I could have prevented a single child's death or maiming or serious injury, and I didn't do it because I was afraid. Now, courage, this is a bit of a cliche, right? But it's true. Courage is not the absence of fear. Fear is perfectly natural. Fear is a gift. There's a book called The Gift of Fear that I recommend everyone read, especially in this community. Fear is there for a reason. We did another video earlier today where a female officer is approaching a house, and it was for a guy with a hammer breaking out windows. We did a video from Las Cruces, New Mexico, where it was a male officer going for a trespasser. And in both the cases, you could tell they weren't able to sense danger. They didn't get it that they were in danger. The female had a guy come at her with a hammer. She saw him 30 yards away with a hammer in his hand, walking aggressively towards her. And he was 5 feet away before she drew her gun. That's a problem. It's just that this can't be happening, or I can't believe this is happening. What do I do? Or I'm going to call for backup so I get a warm fuzzy that people are coming. No, the fight's already started. You just haven't heard the bell yet. You got to get in there and get to work and handle your business. The guy in Las Cruces, just a terrible video. So hard to watch.
That one's hard.
You've seen that one?
Yeah,
he shows up for the trespasser.
Yeah, and he got stabbed a bunch, and I don't think he made it. So
no, he did not make it. So let me piggyback off that for a minute. I know I'm a lot. It's ADD and ADHD and stream of consciousness, but just stick with me. It'll all make sense eventually. So the one it's deadly serious. I'm not joking about this. The one in New Mexico taught me another lesson that I wish I would have talked about during the badge camp, but now I'm telling everyone who will listen about it. A lot of people leave the house in our sort of self-defender community. They leave the house, and sometimes they're like, man, I'm literally walking to the mailbox. I don't need to strap up. I'm just going to the kids' school. I don't need to strap up. I'm just going to. Don't go to your kid's school with a gun, by the way, if it's illegal. Just FYI, I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm going fill in the blank. I don't need my gun. After watching that video, any thought of me ever thinking that again, if I'm leaving the house, is gone, because there was a young man who was a former military member. I want to say he was an Army Ranger. I've trained with those guys. They're, can I say, badass? They're completely badass. And I love watching them work. We did some room clearing with them. It was impressive. Anyway, this young man sees this happening, this brutal stabbing, and the officer is screaming because he's being gutted alive. This young man had to run back to his truck, retrieve a firearm, and then come back to the scene. And then he burned a guy to the ground, but it was too late. And now I don't know that he would have gotten there in time had he had a gun on him, but I don't want to be the person wondering, man, if I'd have had my gun on my person, could I have gotten a couple of shots off and stopped the stabbing in time where this officer could have been saved? Same principle as, I'm going to wait outside the school for 20 minutes while SWAT team, is assembled. I don't want to ever live with that knowledge that I could have maybe done something and I just couldn't because my attitude wasn't right. I wasn't prepared. I wasn't carrying. I wasn't doing the things that I know I should be doing as a self-defender, because I think people are going to like this. I think some people are born protectors. It's in their DNA. I've got 2 sons. One of them is completely doesn't think about it at all, no matter how much I drive it home. The other one's about to be a cop. So those 2 people raised the same way, exact same DNA, right? One of them is, I think, was a born protector. The other one is just not. That's not something that he considers. That's something he thinks about very much. So I think there is an element of sort of DNA of people who God said, you're gonna protect people around you. It's just my 2 cents. I could be totally off base with that, but I think it's something that you're at least partly born with. And some people will take that sort of inborn, innate drive to protect people, and they'll hone it and they'll work on it and they'll get the skills and the attitude and the plan and everything else. Some people won't, but they'll still be the people that will jump in. If someone's beating somebody up on the subway, they'll jump in and do what they got to do. Or someone to see someone being robbed, and they think they can make a difference, even with no training and no skills and no plan, they're going to jump in because it's just innate to them. Does that make any sense? Do you agree with that or no?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a piece of us that, deep down inside, you're going to know if you have it. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to know if you got what it takes. And if you don't have what it takes, I don't think that's something that should be ostracized or,
Concur.
or made light of or anything like that. It's just there's other ways, like you said earlier, there's other ways to serve. So,
What-
and we even saw that like back in the Marine Corps. Like we saw that,
Mhm.
um, we knew that it wasn't like we were, of course we would still talk smack on, the guys that worked in the office and,
Right. Rear
and all that
echelon
stuff.
folks, I think you called them.
Of course, yeah. So there's that. But, the thing is though, every Marine is a rifleman. So,
Correct.
if you're not willing to do that at least, then, there's other places for you.